Brian? Okay. At this time, I'd like to reconvene the meeting of the Wall Township Board of Education. If you could please stand for the flag salute. I just want to take a minute to thank the NNDCC for always presenting our colors for us. And tonight I actually took a moment, and so I would like to specifically thank Matthew Ulanis, Ian Fisher, Ethan Sealand, and Thomas Lawrence, who were the gentlemen with our colors. Are you going to roll call? Mr. Smythe will take a roll call.
Mr. Adenizio? Mr. McGee?
Mr. McGee will not be here this evening.
Mr. MacArthur?
Here.
Ms. Malloy? Here. Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak? Here. Mr. Wozniak?
Here.
Ms. Connolly?
Here. At this time, we are going to have a special presentation of the audit.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ralph Picone of our auditing firm, who will give the presentation.
Good evening. You may notice that we're presenting the audit a little bit later than typical. The statutory due date is usually December 5th, but there's a new accounting pronouncement this year, and the state was delayed in getting information that was required for that, and so the state extended the deadline to February 28th. So you have met the deadline to be filed on time. The audit report has an unmodified opinion, which in layman's terms means you have a clean audit opinion. It means that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. It's obviously what you always strive to have. I wanted to take a moment and review your fund balance position at year end. If you look at the first page of the audit synopsis, which is the governmental funds balance sheet, this is the balance sheet of the 4 major governmental funds that the district has. Moving from right to left, you have the debt service fund, which is used solely for the repayment of the principal and interest on the district's long-term debt. Next, we have the capital projects fund, which is used to account for the projects that are funded by both capital reserve and any SDA grants that are received from the state. Next, we have the special revenue fund, which is used to account for any state, federal, and local grants that the district gets. And then the first column is your general fund. That's really the fund for the day-to-day operations of the school district. So about 3/4 of the way down the left-hand side are the various components of fund balance. The first one, capital reserve of $3,782,795. This reserve can only be used to fund projects that are in the district's long-range facilities plan. The next amount, capital reserve designated for subsequent years' expenditures of $3.1 million. This is capital reserve that the district withdrew into the 18-19 budget. So whatever of that $3.1 million isn't spent this year will go back to capital reserve. Next, we have maintenance reserve of $300,000. This money cannot be used for capital, but can only be used to keep the district's facilities in their current working condition. Next, we have maintenance reserve designated for subsequent years' expenditures of $500,000. This is money that the district withdrew into the 18-19 budget And just like capital, if you don't spend that money, it's going to go back into maintenance reserve. Next, we have emergency reserve of $695,000. This was a reserve that was created in 1718. It's one of the more restrictive reserves. You need state's approval to withdraw it. But two things you can spend the money on is if your health benefit costs exceed a certain percentage, an increase in a particular year, and for certain security measures as well. Next, we have reserve for encumbrances of $412,000. These were orders that were placed prior to June 30th, but the goods or services weren't received. So these orders roll over into the next year's budget and then are liquidated as you receive the goods. Same with the number underneath it of the $115,000. That's also encumbrances. The difference between the two is that the first amount of $412,000 are a little bit higher authority because those encumbrances were established by a board resolution. So those are probably more for capital type projects, where the other encumbrances are more of your day-to-day purchases like supplies, textbooks, things like that. Then we have designated for subsequent years expenditures of $350,000. This is money that the board elected to use as an item of revenue in the 18-19 budget. And then the last amount of $854,000 is unassigned fund balance. That number is a bit deceiving, though, because you may recall a number of years ago when the state had a fiscal crisis, they started making your June state aid payment in July, and they actually started budgeting for it in their next fiscal year. So under generally accepted accounting principles, those two fiscal years has to match. So you can't realize it as a revenue because they don't recognize it as an expense to the next fiscal year. But when you add back that June state aid payment that you received in July of about $662,000, you get $1,516,253, and that's really your true fund balance at year end. That's the maximum 2% you're allowed to have. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, from a financial perspective, where you sit, you're obviously in a solid financial position. You're at the maximum 2%, and you have a number of reserves that are funding different projects and expenses. Next, I just want to briefly mention your food service account. It's not in the synopsis schedule, but your food service account, actually the schedule that's in the audit report for the revenue and expenses of food service is coming to a loss of about $17,000. The reason I bring it up is because I know the board secretary, Mr. Smythe, prepares an analysis of food service revenue and expenses for you on a monthly basis, and I believe his year-end schedule came to a profit of about $23,000. There are certain expenses that are captured in our audit report which aren't captured in that particular spreadsheet. That spreadsheet, to my understanding, is more to kind of show the day-to-day operations of the district, the revenue coming in, and the expenses associated with running the program. Certain expenses, such as depreciation on capital assets, there was some retroactive payroll paid that related to prior year, and also some equipment that was purchased was not included in his report because it wasn't part of sort of the day-to-day operations of the district, but it's part of our audit report. So I just wanted to point out that it's not that his report is incorrect, it's just that there's some differences in what is reported in ours. Lastly, there are two audit recommendations in the report. The first one is it is recommended that political contribution disclosure forms be obtained when required. Anytime you pay a vendor between $17,500 and $40,000, which is the district's bid limit, and you award those contracts through quotations, you're also supposed to obtain a form called a political contribution disclosure form. And there were 3 instances where quotes were obtained for the service, but the political contribution disclosure form was not. The second recommendation is it is recommended that internal controls be enhanced to ensure the district report of transported resident students be in agreement with supporting documentation. One of the categories of the district report of transported resident students is special education students with special transportation needs. If you have students like that that receive those transportation needs, that student's individualized education plan, or IEP, is supposed to specifically state that they're required to have transportation because of a need. And 4 of the IEPs that we examined for students that had this need, that service was not spelled out in the IEP. I just want to point out that neither of the two recommendations are repeat recommendations. Also, neither of them rose to the higher level of recommendation that it could be, which is either a significant deficiency or a material weakness. They're both what we consider to be immaterial findings. And lastly, with a school district your size and the amount of compliance requirements that the state of New Jersey places upon you, to have a report with only 2 immaterial findings, I think is a testament to the superintendent, the business administrator, their staff, and the job that they do. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions? Apparently we do not. Thank you very much. We appreciate the report. At this time, our policy holds that we will open public comment following a presentation for the purpose of commenting on or seeking clarification on the presentation in accordance with policy 0167. This public comment portion is limited to 5 minutes per person, and again, should only be for the purpose of commenting on or seeking clarification on the presentation we just had.
Hi, I'm Betsy Cross. Got a question for Mr. Pacone. Where did he go? Oh, there you are. Do you actually work on our account day to day? Okay. How many years?
Ms. Cross, you're not going to be cross-examining our auditor. Thank you very much. This is for
I'm
public.
here to ask questions.
No, you're not going to ask questions of the auditor.
Okay.
You're going to ask. You're going to make comments for the 5 minutes if
Given
you'd
all
like.
the problems that we've had in the past, I'm always leery of these audit reports. A couple things get me a little bit concerned is Brian's numbers with payroll. I guess about 4 years ago, food service was bankrupt. Now I guess we're at negative 17,000. And I'm not sure why Brian did not include those 2 items that you included. One was back payroll, retro payroll, and one was equipment. So maybe Mr. Smythe can comment on why he did not include that and why we're running at a negative $17,000 for food service. It's not supposed to be a profit center, but we can't run day-to-day operations losing money. I think the food service costs are very expensive right now, but you can't keep running a business in the negative. My other question was, what I would like if, I look at some other audit reports and I see them do some spot audits, and they look at attendance, they look at health benefits, and they might look at students. Those are some things I'd like to see. I don't think we have a handle on how many students are actually in Wall that may not live here anymore. It seems you enroll in kindergarten, and that's about it. We never ask for a proof of residency after that, and we can have a lot of people here. A lot of other towns are requiring residency, and I'd like to see something done here, so maybe you can give some recommendations on that. One thing I did notice that I would like to have done by the auditor is, this is one thing that I looked at, and I haven't looked at it enough, but I've been summarizing it, and Mr. Smythe's W-2s don't seem to match his contracts. And I noticed in 2005...
Mrs. Cross,
I'm going to finish, Mr. Gross.
you can finish if you want, but again, this 5 minutes is supposed to be devoted.
And I would like the auditor... Mr. Gross,
I'm going to ask you...
this is my time.
No.
Mr. Gross, do you want me to mention this? Is there something the matter with Mr. Smythe's W-2s versus his contracts?
We've gone through this already, so
okay,
we
so
know
let's go through it again tonight,
we know why it doesn't match. So, but again, we're going back.
Can you go over again why it doesn't match? Maybe
no, because we're going to let your. By the way, your 5 minutes is still counting. Going with regard to the.
So please be quiet so I can finish.
With regard to the audit.
Let me finish.
With regard to the audit.
Mr. Smythe's payroll records
is not part of the audit.
Do not, and I'd like it to be part of the audit.
Well,
I think
but
you should
you're
hire
not
him
the auditor.
separately to look at Mr. Smythe's payroll records.
Okay.
Because I've noticed 2005, 6, 7,
We went through
8,
this already.
9, and 10. No, we have not.
Oh,
We have gone through 5, and you cannot prove that the board ever approved Mr. Smythe's $20,000.
Could we stay on the audit?
So that's why there's a lawsuit going on right now. So we should get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
But now we might have to get to the bottom of 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Of course.
So I would like the auditor to take a look at Mr. Smythe's contracts, compare it to his W-2s, and see why they're not matching, and let us know. I'm a taxpayer here in Wall. I pay very high taxes, and it's a recommendation I would like to be taken up by the board. And, you know, maybe it's something you can vote on tonight, and I would appreciate that. I'm wondering why we don't have political contributions disclosure forms for 3 quotes, and I'd like to know who those quotes were from. What companies were they from, and did they actually get the business? If you could go over that at some point. Transportation was a problem last year. I do remember I was in Mr. Smythe's office when the auditor said Mr. Smythe wasn't getting back to him and he needed to write up his transportation report. So maybe this is a little bit different, but I'm not sure why the people that are getting the transportation, it's not noted in their IEP. Maybe Ms. Duffy can look into that as well. We know food service was at a loss years ago because Mr. Smythe was buying Dell computers, Xerox copy machines, and paying utility bills out of it, and nobody ever knew. So we really need to get to the bottom of some answers here. And we know we've had problems in the past, and we had crystal clean audit reports, and they never should have been clean. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cross. Is there anybody else for public comment on the presentation of the audit? Seeing none, we will close the public comment.
Well, relative to the audit that was presented tonight, with regard to the revenue expense report, that report that we provide on a monthly basis records the expenses for the current year, payroll that is retroactive relative to a prior year's contract is not a current year expense from a revenue and expense report, so therefore that wouldn't be reflective against the current year revenues. That's why that is not recorded. We also view reimbursements to parents that may be moving out of the district after they've put money on account. We've refunded them. That's not an expense that we've recorded as a operating expense because it isn't an expense. It's a refund on our revenue and expense report. However, in the audit, it is expense from our line within our fund accounting system. Additionally, depreciation is a calculation that's done by the audit, and we do not calculate that or factor that into the revenue and expense report, which is strictly a comparison of sales for a given month as compared to expenses for that same given month, which is different than what the audit is recording. So that's why it's recorded differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smythe. Moving on, it's time for the student representative report.
Good evening, Mrs. Connolly, Superintendent Dyer, and members of the Board of Education. With Semester 1 transcripts being finalized, students are moving full steam ahead into the 3rd marking period. Students are finishing up their last bit of material to learn before AP exams, and some are starting their half-year courses. 3rd block classes had a little interruption for Valentine's Day this past Friday, when the Care Club dropped off flowers that students sent to each other. It was a great way to celebrate the holiday and spread positivity throughout the student body. And Peace for Paws also sold puppy kisses, with proceeds going to the Township Police Department K-9 unit. The 2nd semester is the most exciting time of year for most students. Sophomores have the Dames Ball this Friday, the 22nd, at the Waterview Pavilion, and the juniors had their meeting for their prom in April, which will be red carpet themed and at I Play America. Seniors leave for the Disney trip next month and recently ordered their fast passes. As we speak, the band students are relaxing under the sun on a cruise ship after their successful concert this January. And winter sports are slowly winding down, yet Wall Knights had some great success this season. For the first time in school history, the girls' bowling team won their division. Boys basketball is heading in, oh, there we go. Boys basketball is heading into states, and we wish them the best of luck. And looking ahead, the girls' volleyball team and the softball programs are holding clinics for young players in the community, and all the spring sports are ready to go for March 1st. Teams like the boys and girls lacrosse, track and field, and baseball teams have had their preseason meetings. And thank you once again, Mrs. Connolly, Superintendent Dyer, and members of the Board of Education for allowing me, and well, Molly's not here today, but for allowing us to speak on behalf of the student body. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the student representative?
I had one. So it's my understanding that the real purpose of the cruise is for the music students to perform and on the ship and to be judged by musicians and get some feedback. And the relaxation part is just an added benefit, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions or clarifications? Okay, seeing none, would you like to go get some homework done? Absolutely. Have a great night, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. We're moving on to my president's report, and we're going to start with a little student acknowledgement. The students of the month at Wall High School. In 9th grade, we have William Bramley. In 10th grade, Angeline Bellotti. 11th grade, Michael Caputo. And 12th grade, Elizabeth Benatti. We also have students of the second marking period, which are designated by department. So for art, we have Jordan Hine in 12th grade, business, Anna Skenna in 12th grade, English, Nichelle Verdia in 10th grade, family life, Brianna Eisenberg in 10th grade, math, Haley Merriman in 11th grade, music, Joshua Jensen in 12th grade, NNDCC, Isabella Scalcione in 12th grade, PE and Health, Trevor Lokeson in 10th grade. Science is Alexander Longo in 11th grade. Social Studies is Catherine Matacola in 12th grade. Technology Education is Michael Holtz in 9th grade. World Language is Megan Cole in 12th grade. The nights of the week for 10th grade was AJ or Andrew Schlip for the week of January 7th. In 12th grade, Cameron Rosby Johnson for the week of January 14th. In 11th grade, Morgan Jost for the week of January 21st. And in 10th grade, Christina Molinari for the week of January 28th. So congratulations to all of those students for those accomplishments. And for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to or don't do it regularly, I would also very much encourage you to visit the district Facebook page, because every day there are tons and tons of posts about all the wonderful things the students and teachers are accomplishing in the schools. And it's a really great way to celebrate them and see some of the really fun, exciting, awesome stuff that's happening in our buildings on a day-to-day basis. So in addition to that, I just want to give a shout out to all those people. The response to public comment from last month's meeting is available on our website, so I welcome you to go look at that. Again, it's not a response to every comment. It's more of a general response to the issues that were raised, and that is available monthly on our website. For me personally, the President's Council met on January 29th. Superintendent Dyer and I had the opportunity to meet with the leadership from the various parent-teacher organizations in the district, as well as leadership from the Crimson Knights Foundation. We were updated on different events that the various organizations are planning and addressed different issues raised by those in attendance. In addition, Joe Lee, who is our Director of Technology, provided a brief overview of BARC, which is an internet monitoring system that the district is currently reviewing. With that said, also, I know that a number of us had the opportunity to attend Lip Sync earlier this month, which was put on by CAPE at Central School, which was a wonderful and very fun event. I believe the West Belmar gift auction is coming up this Friday. I'm not sure if tickets are still available, but there's that event to support and plenty of other things coming down the pike, and those dates and things like that are available on our website as well. On Thursday, February 7th, the board convened for a special meeting for the purpose of awarding a contract to Luongo Associates for the design, bidding, and construction administration of the HVAC improvement project to provide air conditioning in most of the district schools. It was imperative to hold this special meeting because the time was of the essence, and we wanted to have the work completed this summer. So we had a special meeting just for that purpose, which is why that wouldn't be happening tonight, but I wanted everybody in attendance to know about it because it was kind of a big deal, and those of us who are part of it are very excited about it. On Saturday, February 9th, Mrs. Wozniak and I were able to attend a school board's training on meetings that matter. It highlighted the fact that well-planned and executed board meetings should showcase our expectations as a board and set the pace for the district to follow. Further, meetings should be designed to drive student achievement and district success. Attendees there identified strategies to make their meetings more effective and were provided with a number of useful resources. Later on this evening, as part of tonight's agenda, this board is going to support a resolution hopefully support a resolution, urging the passage of A672 S55-8, which is suspending the testing requirements for graduation. On Friday, Governor Murphy's administration and the Education Law Center did come to an agreement that provides options other than PARCC for students in the classes of 2019 and 2020. But what will happen beyond that is still unknown. As such, we will vote tonight on this resolution and hopefully support our belief that PARCC should not be the only assessment and/or pathway to a high school diploma for our students. Our first budget meeting will be held next week on February 26th. And for those of you up here on the dais in particular, I just want to remind you that that meeting's at 6 o'clock, which is a little different than what we normally do. So mark your calendars for that. And that is all I have for my president's report. Mrs. Dyer?
I have nothing at this time to announce for superintendent's updates, but give me an hour or so and I might have an announcement about tomorrow. So depending on how late this meeting goes, you might be the first to hear about a decision regarding the weather. Thank you. It wasn't that funny.
No, I'm just, sorry. So moving on, Mr. McGee would typically deliver our legislative updates, and he is not here, so I'm going to ask for your patience as I attempt to stumble through just an overview of what he provided, and then we will move on. So for the legislative update, which should be available in everybody's packet and I think to the crowd at large, Mr. McGee wanted us to pay attention to the fact that the Senate was seeking clarity on graduation requirements, which we just discovered. We know some clarity was met this past Friday, and further clarity is continuing to be sought. The minimum wage increase is going to apply to public school districts as well. Up until now, they had been exempt from the minimum wage law, but apparently it's going to be impacting us as well. And the National School Boards Association is opposed to the legislation in that sense. He wanted us to know that silent panic alarm installation is going to require that, but I believe we are already in compliance with that, so we're ahead of the curve there. Senate bill is seeking to authorize school districts to provide child care facilities. And he also touched on the new law requiring the historical contributions of people with disabilities and those in the LGBTQ community. So again, all of that is available. We all had it in our packet, and it's available online. Mrs. Zawodniak, I believe you have an update on the Wall Township Community Alliance.
Yes, I do. Thank you. The Alliance met on Thursday, February 7th at 7 p.m. The topics included the police report, and Sergeant James Cadigan talked about the LEAD program for the district's 5th graders, which began this month, or began already this month. The program fosters good decision-making and will teach about destructive decisions. And they also have a program that's called Not Even Once, which is a 3-day program for seniors that will be held in March and will focus on the problem of heroin. And they also have a program on drunk driving that will take place near prom time for the junior class. Project graduation was another topic, and a meeting was held with senior parents on February 12th, and that was in conjunction with the high school's mandatory Disney trip meeting. The Meatball Gala is not going to be held this year. The Alliance says they will bring it back next year with some changes, and to take the place of that, since that's the major fundraiser for Project Graduation, they're going to expand their Easter pancake breakfast, and they're going to make it bigger and better. So we'll see when details are spelled out later on. There's also a Mother's Day flower sale, May 9th and 10th, and since Project Graduation planning starts I don't know, a year in advance, so they're accepting donations of prizes, water, soda, and all those donations can be dropped off at the Wall Youth Center. The Easter Pancake Breakfast and Brunch will be on April 13th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. The food offerings will be expanded and upgraded to attract more people to the event, and there will be a 50-50 raffle. Citizen of the Year, the Alliance is accepting nominations, and forms can be picked up at the Wall Township Clerk's office, and for more information, you can contact the Alliance Coordinator, Kristen Myler. Other schools programs sponsored by the Alliance are the BABES program, which is a puppet-based program for the district's 3rd graders, facilitated by Jill Tabachman, focusing on coping skills, good decision-making, good touch, bad touch, and drug and alcohol abuse. Heroes and Cool Kids is a leadership and mentorship program where high school students mentor elementary and intermediate school students. And, excuse me, we solidified the date for next year's Project Graduation, which is slated for graduation day, which is Friday, June 19th, 2020. It's all confirmed with the Atlanta Club. And the Alliance was very, very happy and communicated how wonderful it has been working with the school district and coordinating to get the programs that they support into the schools seamlessly, and they're very appreciative. The next meeting will be on Thursday, March 7th at 7 p.m., and any board members and community members who wish to attend are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Zawodniak. Does anybody have any questions with regards to the Alliance? I just realized it didn't make it to the agenda, but Mr. Sanfilippo, I know you and Mr. Sullivan, I believe, attended a Monmouth County School Board's meeting. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Surely. So we went to the Old Mill Inn. No, not Old Mill Inn. What is it? Cold Snack Inn. It was a wonderful dinner. Actually, someone from Manasquan on the Board of Ed was there too, who I used to go to church with, so it was nice to see some familiar faces. The business administrator from Howell Township gave a presentation on reading budgets and different things like that. And then there was also a presentation where it was supposed to be kind of like a tag team situation with two people coming in and talking about like crazy board meetings. Basically there was a couple videos that they had shown which were interesting to watch and to sort of analyze and get kind of a feeling from other board members in reference to how they felt about certain situations that went down. There was, you know, just funny videos and also sad at the same point in time. So it was interesting to get other people's opinions on, you know, how they and their boards sort of operate. And I found it, you know, very fulfilling. I had 2 coffees as well, and that was it.
Thank you, Mr. Sanfilippo. Any questions for Mr. Sanfilippo? Okay, and then also somehow it didn't make it onto the agenda, and it's probably partially my fault, but there was a Township Liaison meeting this month. I don't know the date of it.
The 5th, 4th.
Okay, somewhere in the first week of February.
First Tuesday.
February 5th, thank you. That's what you get paid. The Liaison Committee met with the Township Administrator, Jeff Berchan, the Township Committeemen, Tim Farrell and Kevin Orender, and present for that meeting were Mrs. Zawodniak, Mrs. Dyer, Mr. Smythe, and Mr. McGee. Mr. Berchan and the committeemen provided an update on affordable housing and said that there were no material changes, as the target for the township remains around 1,000 units. However, there may be additional clarity in terms of a final number over the coming months. Mr. Bertrand and the committeemen advised that they support the Howell Shared Services Agreement for the district's buses and agreed that it was the best possible solution. The committee noted that the board will continue to pursue potential permanent location during the term of the shared services, and all noted that they intend to work together towards such a location. The committee discussed various shared services opportunities relating to the township and neighboring school districts and municipality. In particular, the focus was on athletic facilities. The administrator expressed interest in certain aspects of potential athletic shared services, such as potential greater use of the baseball field at the municipal complex by the intermediate school baseball team. The committeemen, however, expressed that the township was uninterested in exploring the construction of a community track complex with the district, as well as other potential partners at Orchard Park or any other location. The committeemen proposed the benefits of an indoor track and and sports complex akin to the Bubble built by Toms River School District, although the committee noted that such a facility could certainly prove quite beneficial to the students and community. Such a project would be substantial investment for the district, and the district does not have funds, and there are other more pressing priorities. Although the township can borrow without referendum, the district cannot, and the committeemen did not offer or propose any specific funding sources for such a project. And these minutes were respectfully submitted by Mr. McGee. If the board has any questions or comments on them, I would probably punt to Mr. Smythe, Mrs. Dyer, or Mrs. Zawodniak, who were in attendance. So, any questions on these? Okay. So moving on, we will get into our full-fledged committee reports, and we will begin with the policy committee report with Mrs. Zawodniak.
Thank you very much. The policy committee met on Tuesday, February 5th from 7:15 to 9 p.m., and the report is available on the district website. In attendance were Mrs. Dyer, Mr. Sullivan, and myself. The committee reviewed policies and regulations included in this report, asked questions and received answers about the rationale for proposed changes, and discussed the meaning and interpretation of specific language. The committee's recommendations are to comply with code and statute to provide clarity and/or to suit the needs of the district. The committee was unable to address the entire agenda on Tuesday, February 5th. The following were discussed and recommended for first reading on February 5th, and they were numbers 2422, 2431.3, 2610, 4216, and 5330.04. The following were discussed at that meeting and held for further discussion on February 7th, and they were 4219, 5111, and 5337. Committee again met on Thursday, February 7th from 3:15 to 4 p.m. To finish addressing the agenda items, specifically 4219, 5111, 5337, 5756, 7440, 8561, and 8860. In attendance at the February 7th meeting were Allison Connolly, Superintendent Mrs. Dyer, myself, Michael MacArthur, and John Sullivan. In total, the following policies were considered for first reading. Policy 2422, which is health and physical education, which is mandated and revised. In that discussion, the terms core curriculum content standards, or CCCS, have been changed to New Jersey Student Learning Standards and NJSLS. Policy was revised to remove details under the basic statutory requirements because they're included in the NJSLS. This way, the policy will not have to be revised and readopted when the standards are revised in the future. In addition, an additional standard has been added, and that is as number 16. It's required by statute, and it requires the board to include instruction once during intermediate school on the social, emotional, and legal consequences of distributing and soliciting sexually explicit images through electronic means. Revisions also incorporate the requirement to provide at least 20 minutes of daily recess for students in grades kindergarten through 5, and stipulates that recess time cannot count toward the health and physical education requirement of 150 minutes per week. Next on the agenda was policy 2431.3, practice and preseason heat acclimation for school-sponsored athletics and extracurricular activities. This is mandated and is being revised. New Jersey State Scholastic Athletic Association recently revised their recommended preseason heat acclimation guidelines to minimize injury and enhance players' health, performance, and well-being. Policy revisions stipulate implementing the NJSIAA heat acclimation procedures and expand the application of the heat protocol from interscholastic athletics to all school-sponsored athletic programs and extracurricular activities during warm weather. Next was Policy 2610, Educational Program Evaluation, which is also mandated and being revised. The New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum, known as NJQSAC, requires districts to monitor students' progress and measure effectiveness of programs, initiatives, and strategies. QSAC Operations Indicator number 4 in the District Performance Review, also known as DPR, requires districts to use multiple, meaning more than 2, sources of data for such monitoring and evaluation, and the revision reflects that requirement. Policy and Regulations 4216, dress and grooming, these are new. This policy and regulation for support staff mirrors existing policy and regulation which applies to teaching staff. The committee feels, as indicated in the policy and regulation, that because school employees serve as role models and have a significant influence upon students, having guidelines for support staff would positively impact school climate. Next was Policy 4219, Commercial Driver's License, Controlled Substances, and Alcohol Use Testing, which is mandated and revised. This policy has been updated to reflect changes in federal regulations, and included are the following. The table of prohibited substances and unacceptable levels for testing results have been removed and replaced with a citation to federal regulations where the most current table can be found. This prevents the need to revise and readopt the policy due to frequent unannounced changes to the table. The Federal Highway Administration has been changed to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration as the monitoring agency. The section titled Split Specimen Tests has been revised as federal regulations now place the responsibilities on the laboratory conducting the tests and not on school districts. Next was Policy and Regulation 5111, eligibility of non-resident eligibility of resident, non-resident students, which is mandated and revised. New Jersey Code prohibits refusing admittance of any student from public elementary and secondary school on the basis of immigration visa status, except for students on F1 visas. The committee discussed the process of becoming a district that admits F1 visa students and agrees that it is not in the district's best interest to pursue, and has included language in the policy stating that the district will not admit F1 visa students. Revisions were made to correct grammar and spacing issues. Additional extensive revisions were made to the regulation to reflect current practice as required by statute and code pertaining to the following: residency, domicile status, and the eligibility to attend district schools and continue attending schools under a variety of conditions or circumstances, and proof of eligibility, registration procedures, and tuition assessment. Throughout the policy, the term pupil has been replaced with student. Next was Policy and Regulation 5330.04, which is administering an opioid antidote, which is mandated and is being revised. The existing policy is being replaced in its entirety, and the regulation is new. As required by law, an opioid antidote is to be accessible in school buildings during regular school hours and during the school-sponsored functions taking place in the school or on adjacent grounds for grades 9 through 12. In addition, the committee recommends to make an opioid antidote accessible during school-sponsored functions that take place off school grounds, and to extend accessibility of an opioid antidote to all school grades primary through 12. The policy and regulation address availability and training of the school nurse and designated staff members who volunteer to administer the antidote, and mandatory transportation to the hospital by emergency services personnel of individuals to whom an antidote was administered. Although policy and regulation reflect requirements of statute through statute that became effective on December 1st, revisions may become necessary because guidelines from the DOE have not yet been published. Next was Policy 5337, which is service animals, and that is revised. The revisions reflect that the board may not require an individual with a disability using a service animal to carry liability insurance, and that the district is not responsible to pay or provide a handler for control of the service animal, but is required to provide a person for care and maintenance of the animal, such as tethering or untethering a service dog from a wheelchair, and for taking the dog outside to relieve itself. Next on the agenda is Policy 5756, which is transgender students, mandated and revised. The existing policy is being replaced as a result of the guidelines that were recently released by the Commissioner of Education. The policy includes 7 sections: definition terms, student-centered approach, safe and supportive environment, confidentiality and privacy, school records, and use of facilities. Some of the important issues in the policy are the following: the school district shall accept students' asserted gender identity, and parental consent is not required. Next, the superintendent should consult the board attorney regarding the student's civil rights and protections under the New Jersey law against discrimination in the event a parent objects to the minor student's name change request. Next, the risks associated with the student's transgender status being inadvertently disclosed should be discussed with the student. And due to a specific and compelling need, such as the health and safety of a student or an incident of a bias crime, a school district may be obligated to disclose a student's status. The student should be informed that the school or school district intends to disclose the student's transgender status for the student's protection and well-being. Prior to disclosure, the student would be given the opportunity to personally disclose the information. If a student has expressed a preference to be called by a name other than their birth name, permanent student records containing the student's birth name should be kept in a separate confidential file. This file should only be shared as appropriate according to statute, code, and Department of Education guidelines. A separate file containing records bearing the student's chosen name may also be kept. All students must be allowed to participate in gender-segregated classes or athletic activities, including intramural and interscholastic athletics, in a manner consistent with their gender identity. All students are entitled to have access to restrooms, locker rooms, and changing facilities in accordance with their gender identity to allow for involvement in various school programs and activities. Non-transgender students should also be afforded the option to use a private facility, such as a unisex facility or the nurse's restroom. Next on the agenda was Policy and Regulation 7440, which is school district security, which is mandated and revised. As per amended statute, the recommended revision gives the superintendent the option to designate a school employee with expertise in school safety and security instead of a school administrator to serve as the school safety specialist. The next policy was 8561, procurement procedures for school nutrition program, which is mandated and revised. Sections A2 and D5 are being removed because they now only apply to non-public schools. The USDA recently updated the federal funds procurement method selection chart, and the chart is being provided in the appendix. Policy 8860, memorials, which is new to Wall Township. According to the policy, the superintendent may grant an employee a brief absence without loss of pay or personal leave for the purpose of attending the funeral of his or her direct supervisor or subordinate, provided that no disruption in the educational program will be caused by such absence. The committee recommends approval of the policies and regulations presented for first reading as described in this report and listed on the agenda for tonight's meeting. There are no policies or regulations for second readings or expedited readings. There were no discussions there were no discussion items, there were no non-agenda items discussed, and there were no items requested by committee members for future committee agendas. Linkage of the agenda items to the strategic plan is provided at the end of the report, which can be found on the district website. Respectfully submitted, Robin Zawodniak, chairperson. I'm sorry that was so long, but we covered a lot of ground, and a lot of this stuff is really important, and I just didn't feel that not providing details was in our best interest. Thank you.
And as always, we thank you for your attention to detail and diligence. Are there any questions from board members for Mrs. Zawodniak on her report? Seeing none, I believe, Mr. MacArthur, it is your turn for personnel, please.
Good evening. Thank you. The Personnel Committee met on February 6th from 6 to 6:30. In attendance was Mrs. Dyer, myself, and Mrs. Zawodniak. The committee discussed the Human Resources report with Mrs. Dyer as it was being prepared for the meeting for tonight. The superintendent answered any of our questions to the satisfaction of the committee. We also reviewed the superintendent's attendance for the month, and there were no changes since last month. And the only action for tonight is the committee does respectfully request to adopt the HR report as it is for this evening. Respectfully submitted by me.
Thank you, Mr. MacArthur. Any questions with regards to personnel? Okay. Curriculum and instruction, I believe, is you again? Okay, so Mrs. Zawodniak is going to, Mrs. Zawodniak was kind enough to do the report in Mrs. Molloy's stead, so we will do curriculum and instruction.
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on February 5th from 5 p.m. to 7:05. In attendance were Superintendent Dyer, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Gleason, board members Mr. Sanfilippo, Mr. Wondrak, Mr. Sullivan as the alternate for Mrs. Molloy, and I attended as the alternate for Mrs. Connolly. Also at the meeting were Director of Technology, Mr. Lee, Wall High School Humanities Supervisor, Dr. Skinner, Director of Guidance, Mrs. Misa, Wall Intermediate School Supervisor of Instruction, Mr. Kokoda, who attended for the presentation of the CTAC, which is the Curriculum and Technology Advisory Committee, 2018-19 summary report. That was the first item on the agenda, and the CTAC committee, represented by Dr. Gleason, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Misa, Dr. Skinner, and Mr. Kokoda, presented the summary report, which included findings and recommendations, commendations, related to 4 focus areas from the strategic plan, including technology, social emotional learning, community partnerships, and college and career readiness. The report included the results of student and parent surveys for grades 3 to 12, and some of the highlights of the report include the following. Technology Subcommittee reported positive outcomes for enhanced learning as a result of increased access to technology. One of the recommendations made by the committee was to include exploring a one-to-one take-home initiative at the high school, continue to integrate technology within instruction, and increase professional development to support teachers in instructional technology and for parents in managing their students' screen time. Social Emotional Learning Subcommittee reported positive outcomes for students' relationships with teachers and guidance counselors, as well as their comfort speaking up about school issues with adults at school. Some recommendations include increasing SEL, social emotional learning curriculum at all grade levels, and helping students in better understanding the role of the guidance counselor with regard to the social emotional growth. The Community Partnership Subcommittee reported positive outcomes for opportunities for students in all grade levels to interact with community members, as well as opportunities for service. Students in grades 6 through 12 report high levels of satisfaction with extracurricular activities. Recommendations include exploring the feasibility of more extracurricular activities in grades 3 to 5 and increasing ways to partner with community members, including assemblies, service opportunities, and internships at the high school. The College and Career Pathways Subcommittee reported high levels of student desire to attend college or vocational technical school upon graduation from high school. At Wall High School, student satisfaction with courses preparing them for future careers were reported as high. Recommendations including increasing students' exposure at all grade levels to a wide variety of career pathways. Opportunities such as personal interest surveys, take your parent to school day, career fairs, career of the month highlights in grades 6 to 12, and visits to local businesses are also recommended. The CTAC summary report will be available on the district website. The second agenda item was the Curriculum and Instruction 2019-2020 budget discussion. Dr. Gleason discussed the 2019-2020 budget for curriculum and instruction, particularly with regard to proposed instructional supplies, purchased professional services, and professional development. Some of the new items included in the C&I budget projection include summer RTI data teams at Old Mill School and Allenwood School to allow teachers to analyze end-of-year student achievement data, identify struggling students, and prepare action plans for the upcoming school year. All other schools receive federal Title I funds to support summer data teams. Dr. Gleason also reviewed additional costs such as a new science program for K-5 and supplemental curricular resources for grades 6 to 12 math and K-5 health and physical education. The staff involved, the staff involved in program evaluation have been meeting throughout the year, and they've been meeting at Town Hall at no charge to the district, and the district is very much appreciative. All 3 content areas are under program evaluation this year as per the district's 5-year curriculum cycle, and the staff will be involved in curriculum revision and writing over the summer. Professional development budget items include continued teacher training for the rollout of the reading workshop at all grade levels. A new budget item will be included for the Monmouth County Arts and Education Program to subsidize tuition for accepted students in the 2019-2020 school year. This subsidy shall be applied to tuition only and shall not be applied to any fees, which are wholly the responsibility of the applicant's parents. Third on the agenda and last was the all-wall summer theater camp. Dr. Gleason reviewed the proposal for an all-wall summer theater camp, a 3-week program for students who will be, oh my gosh, there's so many typos, I apologize, I'll fix them, who will be in 4th to 6th grade in the next school year. The planned musical will be Seussical and will run as part of the district's Summer Night Academy. The program is anticipated to run from July 8th to 26th on Mondays through Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with an estimated tuition of $475. A pre-registration link will be emailed to parents interested in securing their child's participation in the program prior to the general registration period in late spring. There's no board action required on these items, on the items in the report. Non-agenda items were not discussed, and the committee members did not request any topics for future committee agendas. Linkage to the strategic plan is provided at the end of the report and is also available on the website. Respectfully submitted, me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wozniak. Do we have any questions with regards to the curriculum and instruction minutes? Mr. Sanfilippo?
Just a quick comment about how really important I felt it was, and very nice to have the student surveys and the parent surveys. And just as sort of like to throw it out there, for parents out there, if you're looking at surveys, please, fill them out as frequently as possible, as it always gives us, important feedback.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. The finance and facilities minutes are next, and typically that would be Mr. McGee. Does Mrs. Dyer want to say something? Go ahead.
If I could just interrupt for a minute and ask everyone to make sure that your cell phones are on vibrate so that they don't all ring. That would be a hint. Thank you.
I don't know how I can follow that up. Mr. Adonisio has kindly agreed to cover the F&F minutes for me, so go for it.
Good evening. I'm still trying to figure out what that little Easter egg was she just threw out.
So, since you're not all going to answer your phones when they do vibrate or ring, I will provide you with the text of the phone call that you're about to receive. Due to the forecast for snow tomorrow, February 20th, 2019, will be an early dismissal day. The high school will dismiss students at 11:45, intermediate school will dismiss at 12:20, and the elementary schools will be dismissed at 1:05. Lunches will not be served. Please send your students with a snack. Teachers, you can bring a snack too. There will be no afternoon session for primary school, and the RAP after-school program will be canceled.
Yay!
And if the forecast is wrong again, in my next life, I'm coming back as a weather forecaster so that I don't have to ever be right.
Again, I don't know how you follow that up, but go not.
No, you can't. So it doesn't even matter what I say at this point. Everybody's focused on that, which is good. Good evening. Finance and Facilities, we met on February 4th, 2019. Meeting started at 5 o'clock, ended at 7:10 p.m. In attendance was President Allison Connolly, Superintendent Cheryl Dyer, Business Administrator Brian Smythe, Facilities Manager Robert Romano, Tenant McGee as a chairperson, John Sullivan, and myself, I'm sorry. Yes, all of me. We also had a guest, Jerry Luongo from Luongo Associates. He presented a report. Also noted Mr. Sullivan left the meeting at 6:50 and wasn't present for the discussion on the non-agenda items. So we're going to start off with the enterprise account that we know next month we're going to be 1 day short in the lunch. But so far, the performance of the enterprise account remains solid. In terms of food service for the year, there's been one fewer food day compared to last year. But the district is at $14,551.46 to the positive in terms of profit and loss versus this time last school year. Specifically, the year-to-date loss at this time last school year was $16,832.51, and this year it's at $2,281.05. Given that last school year ended overall on the positive, the present status is good news. In terms of the wrap-around program, as of January, there was 6 past due accounts, of which 4 are the result of credit card expirations, and the information is in the process of being updated. And additionally, there is approximately $117,500 in cash on hand as of January. Facilities project update. The high school auditorium lighting project, which is being funded by the Crimson Knight Foundation, is proceeding. A light study had been completed and recommended 64 candle light for the space. The recommendation has caused the cost to triple to approximately $50,000, and the district is still waiting for 2 additional labor quotes. The project should be completed in the near term. Once the project begins, it will take approximately 2 to 3 days to complete. Also, we had a pipe freeze at the tech building during the polar vortex. All appropriate steps relating to the insurance and replacement have been taken place. The lighting and motorized projector projects are in the process of completion, and all other projects are proceeding as documented on the updated project list. Facility use permits. There was a spirited and healthy debate regarding the policy of changing parent, teacher, and student groups to the actual cost of custodians and security for events. The committee discussed the pros and cons, and the majority opinion of the committee is to continue the existing policy. That is, if the district is required to bring in non-scheduled custodians and security personnel for such events, the organization shall be required to pay the actual costs of the same to make the district whole. Long-range facility plan. Discussion of the issue also relates to item number 7 on the agenda. Excluding the topic, the main issue addressed is the intent to repave certain parking and activity areas at various schools. Based upon quotes from Monmouth County and investigation, the estimate for the pavement projects are as follows. At Central, the estimate is $60,000 for the side parking lot near the gym and cafeteria and the exterior basketball court. including the existing concrete around the dumpster, which breaks down to approximately $22,000 for the basketball court and $38,000 for the parking area. Of note, the county does not and will not pave the basketball court, and that work will need to be performed by a private contractor. The principal at Central advises that the basketball court is heavily used and necessary for student exercise, recess, etc. At Allenwood, the estimate is $40,000 for the whole side back parking area to the gym and play area. At Old Mill, the estimate is $50,000 for the play area on the side, which breaks down to approximately $20,000 for the front and side and $30,000 for the whole back. Of note, the county would perform the front entrance and side area, and the back work would have to be done by a private vendor. The athletic director is preparing the needs assessment for the district athletic programs. Upon completion, the committee shall discuss and add findings to the long-range facility plan. HVAC improvements at district schools. As noted earlier in the President's report, we had a special board meeting awarding a contract for HVAC. During our F&F meeting, we were presented the report for the district-wide air conditioning project. As would be expected, each of the buildings has a history that impacts what is recommended and what can be performed at each. Based upon the presentation report and prior responses to the RFPs for professional services and discussion, the option and assessment was that the district should retain Longo Associates as the engineer for the project. A portion of the project could be completed this summer, and the larger project required at Central and Allenwood, the larger portion of the Allenwood project, would need to be performed next summer. Among the factors involved in that decision as to which portions upon which to proceed, the most significant are the timing and scope issues. Given that the equipment that needs to be ordered, there would be insufficient time within each to receive what would be needed for Central and Allenwood to ensure that the project's completed prior to students returning in September. Specifically, certain equipment is specifically manufactured to specification and can take up to 15 weeks to receive after order is placed. So that's why we had the special meeting. 2017-2018 audit. The delayed numbers have been received by the state, and the audit is complete, and pursuant to board policy, it was presented this evening. Review of existing professional and extraordinary services. As per board policy, we reviewed professional and extraordinary services every 3 years and decided whether to send out requests for proposals for such services. At present, the only service scheduled to be reviewed is the board's professional service for legal counsel. Regardless of satisfaction with professional services, the board has advertised requests for proposals during each of the last 3 cycles for all professionals. So the committee therefore concludes that it would be continue with the precedent and advise a request for proposals for legal services. School bus rebate program. We've done this in the past. The district applied to the EPA program seeking a rebate award towards the purchase of up to 5 new buses, and the decision is still pending. If the district receives the rebate would be $20,000 per bus purchased. Alternate source revenue. Potential for leasing unused district property for farming was discussed. There'll be further investigation to reveal the cost that make sure it outweighs, make sure we get a financial benefit from it. I'm sorry. 2019-20 school budget discussion. A workshop meeting is scheduled for February 26th, and the committee discussed the dates and times of the meetings. The committee agreed to leave all dates scheduled at this point and will decide whether to hold such meetings on an as-needed basis. Board action, there is none. I'm sorry, we already did that. We had the special meeting. And non-discussed items that were not on the agenda. The board received updates on the Howell lease and bus compound. Based upon communications with the landlord of the existing bus compound and the project to replace a water line in the Howell compound, the commencement date of locating the district buses to Howell may be postponed until 2020. Consistent with all prior discussions and negotiations, the present landlord of Clayton Block can commit to having the buses on the existing lot until that time. As previously advised and discussed, Clayton cannot and will not commit at this time to leasing the property past that time period. If a relocation to Howell is postponed, the commencement of the shared service agreement will also be postponed. The respective boards of education will ask to approve an amendment to the shared services at upcoming meetings, which is on for this evening. There was nothing discussed for future agendas, and the minutes were completed by Tenant McGee, the chairperson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adonisio. I appreciate you stepping in. Are there any questions with regards to the F&F minutes? Okay. There are none, and there was no public relations meeting this month, so there are no minutes to be read there. So moving on, we will go into our second round of public comment. This round of public comment is for agenda action items only, and again, pursuant to policy 0167, it should be limited to 5 minutes per person, and at this time, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Betsy Cross, I live in Wall Township. I was just going over that sheet that was up there from the auditor, and some items that I notice every year is revenue. Revenue was always under projected, and this year it looks like it's by 1.2 million. So I just jotted the numbers down, but if Mr. Smythe can go over why he was off so much. Tuition was a huge one. Miscellaneous, I think he budgeted 50,000. It came in at 900,000. Tuition was the second largest. And let me find the other two. I just had it right before I walked up. But if Mr. Smythe could go over those. This is where the board really needs to be careful, because at the end of the year, Mr. Smythe takes a whole pot of money that he underestimated, and then he moves it God knows where, and then he says, voila, we have $4 million to build the bus compound in a place that doesn't make any sense, which is what happened last year. I'm glad we're finally getting the story now about the bus compound issue, because it was hidden in the executive minutes of October 16th, and Mr. Smythe is actually being sued over that right now. So you could tell there was something going on, and you can tell in his response to the judge that he says he didn't document it properly. And here we are in February, and it took a lawsuit to get the true story. We should have known about this a long time ago. Your one big problem with the contract is you have a contract with somebody that doesn't own the land. So it would be like the Howell Municipal owns the land. So if you're having a contract, it has to be with them. So this contract should be null and void. We should not be moving forward with it. It doesn't make any sense. You did zero due diligence whatsoever. Ms. Connolly, you keep saying anyone can find your due diligence on the website. If you could send me the specific link, because there is absolutely zero that you did that came back from Oprah. Why don't you look up, Ms. Connolly? So, oh, good. So can you go over exactly where we're going to find it? Because every meeting you sit with your head down and then you don't answer any questions. So you've said you've done your due diligence. All the Oprahs that have come back shows zero due diligence for Howell. And the Board of Ed does not own the land, so you can't have a contract with them. The Howell Municipal contract has a no subletting clause in it, so how Mr. Gross missed that. I'm very happy we're going out for new attorneys this year, because Mr. Gross should not be rehired. We have $20,000 in bills right now for opening up Cheryl Dyer's contract, and the list goes on and on and on. We need a new attorney. Kim Keeter, I know the minutes are never documented properly. I brought up, I think she's walking out the door right now, but I think I brought up that her contract was a salary raise retroactively to July, and there's some problems with it. I'm going to give a copy of it to the co-star.
Ms. Cross, I'm not sure that's an action item this evening.
Well, your minutes aren't proper. I brought it up last month, and you didn't document in your minutes, so don't approve your minutes because you're not documenting them right. You have a very big problem. I'm going to give it to the co-star. You actually have Kim Keeter's dates wrong in the contract that you did that you have online. You have her salary increased back to July 1, 2017, and you've also done it for Dawn Choma. I did check the other contracts that were online for all your non-represented. The only two mistakes I see are Cheryl Dyer's and Brian Smythe's secretary. What else? the Finance Business Academy, I think all those students should be here when you go over your budget presentation, and we should have budget binders here for the public to review. I brought this up for the past 8 years now. We still haven't seen it. It seems you don't want the students here to see what you're doing, or else you would invite them and you'd give them budget binders so they could talk about it. There'd be nothing, you know, it would be very helpful. That's going to be their major, to look at an actual budget.
It's okay. She only has 30 seconds.
If Mr. Smythe could give an update on health insurance, I know you have budgeted $9,581,000. I see all the self-insurance reports have pretty much disappeared. If you could give an update on that. Lighting in the high school, is the lighting going to be done before the play? I would like an answer on that.
Ms. Gross, that's not an action item this evening. It's in the part of the
He
facility
mentioned
report.
in his finance
But
and
we're not-
facility reports. Are you approving the finance and facility reports tonight?
There's no action item to approve the finance and facility report now.
So when are we going to have the lighting done in the high school?
Again, that's not
It's
an
just,
action item
it's a
tonight.
comment, Mr. Gross.
That would be at the end of the meeting on all items.
All right. It was good to see, I did see Rose Sergio at the high school Christmas concert. I did not see Miss Dyer, and I did not see Carla York, our part-time music supervisor.
Okay. Those
was
are
a
also
very
not
nice-
action items, but your time
Oh,
is
I'm
also up,
sorry.
Mrs. Cross, but thank you.
Okay, I just thought of that, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Christine Langstites. I'm a Wall Township resident. I'm not really quite 100% sure if this is the time to speak on this, but I'd like to address with the Finance and Facilities Report the facility use permits. Just for those of you who don't know me, I've been
Mrs.
an active.
Stites,
Yes.
you're right. It's on the agenda, but it's not an action item, so you're the last round of public comment.
I would hope that with 7 years of the amount of volunteer time I have quite a bit to address tonight, that you would give me the 5 minutes in this time, since it's also been accorded to other people. So I'll try.
It's not been afforded to other people. She spoke on the special presentation, and then she spoke on the action items. It is for action items only, and we are all volunteers up here, so we do understand your frustration, but non-action items are to the last round.
Okay, so I'll be back in the second round, and
Momentarily.
I look forward to seeing you all then.
Good evening, everyone. Kathleen Duran, Wall Township. I just wanted to make 2 notes. One, the budget was not posted for review until 3:45 today, which afforded very little time for the ordinary person who has a job to review it and be prepared for tonight's meeting by 7 o'clock. It was 116 pages, and I'm going to specifically reserve my comments to it till a time when I can review it, probably by the next meeting. It'll be overtaken by events maybe, but you can all listen to it again at that time. I'd also like to address the Hellebus compound. I was kind of hoping Tenant McGee would be here this evening, because last time I was here, I spoke to the 8 problems that I saw as just a citizen of Wall. With the contract. And I said, as I left the podium, I said, I can't wait till you hit your first problem. And one of the things I pointed out was that nobody had gone to see the property, nobody inspected the property, nobody did an environmental study on the property, no one knows what's underground, above ground, and none of Brian's negotiations or details of that property being selected had been shared with the Board of Education prior to voting. I urged the Board of Education to not vote that evening because there was too many unknowns, and I went through each contract provision. I pointed out the flaws. Tenant McGee told me to get a job to get hired as your school board attorney. I don't need to. I'm just pointing out common sense problems with a contract. And I said I couldn't wait to come up here when you started to hit your first problems. And he's not here, because I would really love to have his apology right now, because you've hit exactly the problems that I foresaw, that I told you to look out for and to not sign the contract for. I told you to wait until you had done your homework, and not one of you did your homework, and every single one of you sat up there and looked at me with all varying expressions of what the heck are you talking about? But I was right. You didn't pay enough attention. And in the meeting in September, I asked all these questions, and I got the answer back saying, our attorney looked at it and it's fine. Well, I pointed out common sense reasons why it wasn't fine, reasons for you to question your attorney who was there that night. It was not Mr. Gross, it was one of his underlings. But your failure to act now has us sitting for months, and who knows what costs you're going to incur because of your failure to do your due diligence, every single one of you. You voted when I begged you not to. And I get the last laugh. I'm sorry Tennant's not here because he's the one who told me to go get a job doing it. But I was right. And I can't wait to see as the rest of it falls, because you got a 10-year contract where you have not done your homework. My criticisms were specific. The contract was drafted by a child, like at the 8th grade level, and certainly hadn't been subject to attorney review. And if it has, I suggest you change law firms. Good night.
Is there anybody else for public comment on action items? Okay. Seeing none, do you want, well, I was going to too, so do you want to go first?
With regard to Ms. Cross's comments, the one comment that actually was an action item that's on the agenda with regard to the audit that was prepared. With regard to revenues that are reported in the audit as compared to budgeted revenue, we budget tuition based on our existing tuition in students. Those are students that are attending the district, and what is projected to be returning students and any anticipated as recommended from our special services department. However, during the course of the year, additional students are approved to be in-district tuition students, and that revenue being the tuition that's paid by another district, is recorded. Additionally, if private tuition students apply to the district to attend our school district in the 17-18 school year, we budgeted for one private tuition student, because the prior year we budgeted about a considerable amount of money. I don't want to be held to the number. It was $40,000, $50,000, and we didn't attain that type of revenue because we didn't have the number of private tuition students that we anticipated. So we reduced it, and then in turn, individuals that are moving into the township will pay tuition until such time as they have a closing on that house. So our revenues for the 17-18 school year for private tuition was higher than what was anticipated. With regard to miscellaneous revenues, we budget $50,000 for exactly that, miscellaneous revenues, which are book fines, when we recycle metal, or any unanticipated revenue that is received. What is included as a revenue on that line item, though, is we have certified tuition calculations that are done in any given year, where any students that we send out within the second year, we receive the certified tuition from the state. If there's if we paid too much, we are refunded that money. If the tuition was underestimated, then we are charged that cost. The same applies to any students that attend Wall Township schools. So if there's a adjustment to the actual tuition, which is based on the actual cost, which does not get completed until the audit is complete, those tuition that we receive that is for the prior year is recorded as a miscellaneous revenue. However, the significant portion of this miscellaneous revenue being recorded as $960,000 has to do with prior year encumbrances from the 16-17 budget that roll over to the 17-18 and don't get expended. The big one was the unsettled contract with the WTEA, and we rolled over salaries in anticipation of paying salaries. When we completed the actual retroactive pay of salaries, any salary line items that were encumbered but were not expended are recorded as a miscellaneous revenue in that given year. It doesn't go back to the prior year. As you're well aware, for that retroactive salary, we had mandated health benefit contributions of over $60,000. They're applicable to the prior year health benefits, but that year is closed. It is then recorded as miscellaneous revenue. So there's a number of factors that go into what we anticipate and then what actually comes to fruition with regard to the actual revenues received. With regard to God knows where I put the money at the end of the school year, That is done at a public Board of Education meeting. I don't put the money anywhere. The Board of Education puts the money. They passed by resolution. In June of 2018, they passed a resolution to put a significant amount of funds, it turns out to be $695,000, into emergency reserve account for the purpose of offsetting future health benefit cost increases, which we're looking to apply in next year's 1920 budget. Additionally, any funds in excess of the 2% allowable surplus was passed by Board of Education resolution to be moved into the capital reserve account to be used strictly for the purposes of capital improvements in the district.
I'm going to ask Mr. Smythe or Mr. Gross to correct me at any point if I misspeak, but the conversation about the transportation compound at Howell is beginning to feel a little bit like Groundhog's Day, because I feel like we keep revisiting the same conversation and the same accusations. I think it is irresponsible at best to conflate the lawsuit with Mr. Smythe as an indication that there's issues at the compound. I think it's unfair to accuse anybody on this dais or who was on this dais over the past 3 years where this has been a conversation of not doing their due diligence or their homework. Information about the proposed transportation facility is available on the district website. There's a whole tab dedicated to it. That includes, please don't interrupt me, Mrs. Cross. Mrs. Cross, you are out of order. Please don't interrupt me. There's information there that includes a collection of the F&F minutes dating back to April of 2015, which is the first time in the F&F minutes that we have a genuine, robust conversation about the transportation compound. They only go to March 2018, so efforts will be made to update those, but it's not like those minutes aren't available in other spots on the website. In that same tab, you can find feasibility studies for Wall High School, Wyckoff Road property, and the Bailey's Corner property, all of which were locations that were dismissed for various reasons, whether they were residential concerns, cost concerns, community concerns, or otherwise, but all were considered with due diligence, as was the Howell site. Beyond that, I think it's important to note that the work that's being done at Howell was planned work by the water company. It has nothing to do with us or with them. It's a prolonged project on a water pipe or something of that sort that needs to be done. And it has nothing to do with us putting our buses there or it being a bad location or anything else. And it's, it's an easy fix for us because we can keep the buses at Clayton for another year while they complete that work and then move them without it being an issue when we're ready in 2020. Beyond that, it's the release of the funds that we were going to put towards a transportation compound that are allowing us to do an important HVAC project and put air conditioning in the schools so that money is being applied to much needed infrastructure projects, what wouldn't be possible if we didn't enter into a shared service agreement with another district. It's something that should be celebrated, not lied about, not accusatory, or not any of these other things. So I think that's all I have to say about that.
Madam President.
The Secretary, Mr. Addonizio.
I just want to touch upon that, especially since I served on F&F since April of 2015, and I mean, like last month's meeting, there was a lot of talk from the audience about us maybe not doing what we should do, and we didn't look at enough places. And I believe we've looked at upwards of 15 different locations. I recall walking with Ms. Waniak and the Township Committee and some members from the state out at Brisbane on a pretty hot summer day. Looking at that location for them to turn around and say that wasn't an option. We've worked with the assemblymen. We've talked to freeholders. I mean, we've searched everywhere. What a lot of people don't realize is that the school system doesn't have the ability to run out and buy a piece of land. That's the first thing. And everybody, I've read some comments. We looked into, somebody mentioned South Wall Little League as a possible thing. And we brought that up at a liaison meeting. And then we found out that was part of Green Acres, and money that's bought with Green Acres can't be used for bus compounds or parking stuff. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. When we went into this, that many different things were talked about, and I think pretty much everybody here is aware of them. The easy way out for the district would have been, because we've had people approach us, privatize. We could get rid of our bus fleet, sub it out, and that would be it. We wouldn't have any more employees and probably save some money over a course of a couple years. To me personally, and I think many people here, probably everybody, I think that's not the way to go, because we lose quality. Because if there's a problem with somebody on the bus now, they call, go through the chain of command, and it's taken care of. You call a private company, they just transfer that driver to another bus, and there's, you know, the problem can continue someplace else. So I think for us to keep our employees and provide the services we do by moving it to Howell, which is only a couple extra miles, it's, what is it? It's like 3 or 4 miles to Wall High School? 7 miles. But it's even closer to the bus stops in the southern part of the town. I think it's well worth it. Now, that's not to say that the board and the district isn't going to continue doing our homework and looking at other places, because that's something we've been talking about all along. Would we love to have it here in Wall someplace? Absolutely. Can we find someplace here in Wall? We don't know. As of today, we don't have anything. You know, the Clayton block, we're on borrowed time. And thank God we are, because their deal fell through right now, and we can still continue to park there. But it's not going to be that way. That land is very valuable. It's worth a lot of money. It's worth a lot to put an office complex there. And, you know, they want to make money, and that's what they're going to do. So to say that we haven't done our due diligence, we haven't looked. I went out to the site. I saw it. It's an existing lot where they park buses. There's no need for environmental impact studies. There's no need for to worry about what's underground, because they've been parking buses there for years now. So I do take offense to say that didn't do due diligence, because I certainly know we've sat around at numerous meetings and we've banged our head over this particular subject, where pretty much we've all been in line with our thinking that we want to keep our employees, but we also need a place to park our buses. So I just felt it was necessary to say that, because that kind of bugs me.
I think you're absolutely right, and I thank you for making the point about us doing everything we could to avoid privatizing or outsourcing our bus drivers, because that was the priority of the board through all of this. So I thank you for that as well. Anything else?
No, I agree. Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, so at this point, I need a motion to approve the secretary's minutes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call. Questions or comments on the secretary's minutes? Okay, none. Roll call.
Mr. Addonizio?
Yes.
Mr. McGee? Apologize. Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak? Yes. Mr. Waniak?
Yes.
Ms. Connolly?
Yes. At this time, do I get the motion first? I need a motion to approve the policies and regulations listed for first reading.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, at this time, I'll open the floor for public comment on the policies listed, policies and regulations, listed for first reading. There are no second readings this evening. Yes. 5736. There's no 5736?
Yes, there is.
5756?
Sorry that I have no voice left tonight. I wanted to address first 8860 memorials, second paragraph about the granting of employees absence without loss of pay to attend funerals. I think that's a matter that should be part of the teachers' and the staff's union contracts, not necessarily a policy of the school. I just wanted to make that note. And for 5736, for those who are here tonight who don't know, it's transgender.
5756.
I'm sorry, 57, no, I have it as 5736 on the printout. Okay, well, I printed it out off your site, and it says 5736, and I printed out multiple copies, so I can actually give you one. Just don't count it against my time. It's called Transgender Students, and it notes that Wall Township is adopting the Department of Education's guidance on the issue, which I believe that if most people were aware of that this was getting passed tonight here in Wall, there might be some objection, because it does provide that there's no obligation of the schools to inform you of your child's choice. If your child wants to make a choice to identify themselves as a different gender than they are, whichever of the 6 chosen genders the school will now recognize, that there is no obligation that they tell you. And if you call and ask, they don't tell you. It is child-friendly rule, but parents should be aware that it completely removes your knowledge. In fact, your neighbor will know prior to you finding out, because all the other kids in school and all the teachers and all the staffs will understand about your child being one of the 6 identified genders, but not you. They specifically don't get to tell you, and I find that highly objectionable. In fact, Wall Township has adopted GLAAD, which is a Gay and Lesbian Association's recommendations on handling this, and they went against the PTA and other school groups' recommendations. There is no requirement that Wall pass this. It is not the law in Wall, but they have taken it and run with it, and I personally find it objectionable that the information is not disclosable to a parent, and I really think you should reconsider it. You can shake your head, but the guidance is not mandatory. It is not mandatory, and there is no affirmative obligation, but the way the wall policy is written, there is no obligation to respond to an inquiry from a parent with information as to your child's gender status. Mr. Gross?
Are you finished?
No, he was.
I asked him to wait until you were finished.
I'm finished.
Then you can have a seat. Thank you very much, Mr.
Oh no, I
Chair.
thought he had something to say.
Yes. The guidelines that are provided by the Department of Education are pursuant to statute, and therefore they are a requirement. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you so much. That's why every school district is required to pass it. Thank you. So far, that's why we're doing it as along with everyone else.
Roll call, please, Mr. Smythe.
Mr. McGuire?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Abstain?
On all of it?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak? Yes. Ms. Waniak?
Yes.
Mr. Anesia?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes. There are no items for second reading, so I need a motion to approve the Board of Education report by consent agenda items A, B, and C.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Any questions or comments on any of the items listed there? Okay. Mr. Smythe?
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes.
Ms. Waniak?
Yes.
Mr. Anesia?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes, and with that motion carrying, I
One
just,
second.
oh, sorry.
Ms. MacArthur?
Yes.
Sorry, you did me out
Just
of
wanted
order
to make
there.
him feel it, Ms. Conley?
Yes. With that carrying, I just want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that we did in fact approve our resolution urging the passage of A672 and S558, which will suspend, which is to suspend the testing requirements for graduation. Mrs. Dyer, item number 16.
Yes, thank you. At this time, I would ask for a motion to approve by consent agenda item number 16 on the agenda, A through L inclusive.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments on the superintendent's report? Seeing none?
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes.
Ms. Waniak?
Yes.
Mr. Anesia?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes. Mr. Smythe, item number 17.
Ask for a motion to approve items 17A through G by consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments with regards to the business office agenda? Seeing none?
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes on A through F, abstain on G.
Mr. Wondrak?
Yes.
Ms. Waniak?
Yes.
Mr. Anesia?
Yes.
Mr. MacArthur?
Yes.
Ms. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes. Okay. At this time, we'll open the floor for our final round of public comment, and this is for anything that bears discussion. Still limited to 5 minutes. Do you want to go? Safe travels, Glenn?
Oh, Dory, you're leaving? Did we note the time that Dory's leaving? Thank you very
9:08.
much.
9:08.
Right. Why are you on the board, Dory? You should probably resign. You should, I agree. I just gave I'll take Dory's seat. You want me to sit down now? Who said that? You want me to sit down?
Your clock is running, Mrs. Cross, and please
So,
address.
please.
Ms.
I don't,
Cross.
I think you ran and you don't even live in the
Mrs.
town.
Cross, please.
Right, okay. I just gave the co-star the copy of Kim Keeter's secretary and Dawn Choma's. No matter what you look at in Wall, there's a problem. So here we have now, we went back, retroactively changed Kim Keeter's contract, and now we made a mistake because we put the wrong amounts back to the wrong year. So, that's why you don't open contracts up mid-year. And I'm not sure why we're paying 2 secretaries to actually sit here, or one of them typing up the minutes for Mr. Smythe. So if Mr. Smythe is our custodian of records, we're paying 8 hours for 2 secretaries to be here. I mean, this is crazy. Once people start looking at these contracts, we're like, what are we doing? He's the custodian of records. He should be doing the minutes. So please answer. I don't get it. And now you got to fix these contracts. I mean, Robin signed it. Cheryl signed the wrong contract. Everybody's signing wrong contracts around here. And did we not have, I mean, it seems it was certainly on purpose to not put up the audit until 4-something this afternoon. Who could possibly have the time to look at it? So obviously that had to be done on purpose, Ms. Connolly. You're the president. Why are you doing this? It's a disgrace. What else? I'm going to go read, Ms. Connolly. When I Oprah anything you did for Howell, what came back? I asked for any contracts, notes, reports, feasibility studies, pictures, emails with Howell, and all shared correspondence. And you know what came back? Records did not identify any records that would be responsive to your request. That means you didn't have any. So don't be up here telling me you have done everything for Howell, because you cannot prove it. Can you send me what you keep referring to up here? Because it's an outright lie. And I will keep correcting you when you sit up here and lie to everybody that lives in Wall Township. Ralph, can you give us the date that you visited the site? You just said that you visited the site in Howell. What day did you visit it? You signed the contract the 25th. What day did you visit the site? All right. Why can't Ralph answer that question? Did he visit it after he signed that you approved a contract, or before?
Mrs. Cross, you're well aware of the review of the rules, so why don't you just keep talking?
I will. What else can I go over that are problems? It looks like Ms. Dyer is creating overtime reports after the fact. When I put in an Oprah for the overtime for Kim Keeter, this is not what I should have gotten. I should have gotten an overtime report at her old rate for the months of July through November, but I didn't get that. So that shows to me that somebody's not doing something right, and that would be Ms. Dyer. What else did I look at this month that isn't right? I brought up, I could tell that you over budgeted for salaries, because when I took 2% of the amount you were paying for salaries, you come up with a number. Mr. Smythe hides all these extra numbers everywhere else. And I even sent a very specific email saying, how could you possibly come up with these numbers? And sure enough, what does Mr. Smythe tell us? Oh, that's right. Now we just moved it to miscellaneous because I had the numbers wrong. Well, I told you a year ago before you approved the budget they were wrong, but you approved them anyway, everybody that was on the board. So the nonsense that we keep hearing. And I would like to have the budget binders for the very first time, Ms. Connolly, instead of you hiding all of the numbers until you approve them. It doesn't make any sense, and you should have the students here looking at them. Hopefully we're going to hear very soon about the lawsuit for Cheryl Dyer opening up her contract. Another issue that never should have happened. And anybody that approved that contract should have to resign. And anybody that approved the bus compound should have to resign. Now, when I printed off the agenda, I didn't have, I don't think, that Howell change that now that you're talking about, which I would like to see attachment B6. It says recommend approval of the amendment to the shared services agreement of October 3rd, 2018 between the Howell Board of Ed. Do you have a copy of that I could have? Because when I printed it off, it wasn't there. I don't know if it's there right now, but I don't even know what that says. Is it online? Does anybody know?
Mrs. Cross, your time is up.
Do you know if it's there? You're the board president.
I'm fully aware. Thank you. We will answer questions when we're ready, when public comment is over. Thank you very much.
Kathleen Duran-Wall. Ralph, what was the date you visited the property?
Again, it's not question and answer, so you can use your 5 minutes, and Mr. Adenizio will answer that question later on if he wants to.
That would be great. I thought it was very ironic, Allison, that you said that it was a victory. I think the victory goes to the residents of Allaire Racquet Club who came here and backed up Betsy to get you to not vote on the proposal to have the bus depot placed at 18th Avenue. Those are the people who deserve the kudos, not anyone on the board. It took many, many meetings with well over 100 people each to convince you that it was a bad choice on many levels. But I don't give you any kudos for finally listening. You finally caved to public pressure and common sense. The contract still has open-ended environmental liabilities on there. I pointed that out. And Ralph, you are absolutely right. They've been parking buses on that spot for years. Oil and gas, it seeps into the ground. It can cause, maybe not, underwater, groundwater contamination. But Wall Township signed a contract that provides that we have unlimited liability for whatever happens on that property. How you prove which drip of oil caused the contamination is impossible. So basically, Wall signed an open-ended, unlimited liability contract that I told you not to sign, not in its present configuration. I'm not even passing judgment on the property, the site. It may or may not be the best site. I'm not even giving you my opinion on that. What I am saying is the contract is fatally flawed and is going to open us, the taxpayers, up to the possibility of having a huge amount of expense to be paid when you guys are all long gone. And maybe, hopefully, I'm still living here. The transgender issue, just so you know, the guidance, Mr. Gross was absolutely incorrect, and I have up here, if anyone wants to see it, including Mr. Gross for his edification, the Department of Education's transgender student guidance for school districts. The Department of Education does have power pursuant to the statute to issue guidance. There is no law that says that the rights that Wall gave, which very few schools in the entire United States have done, even in New Jersey have done, it's no requirement that they do so. And as long as everyone here understands what you just agreed to, that any child does not have to prove that they are transgender. The old law said at least there had to be some kind of history or enduring sexual orientation presentation, but now there is no longer any requirement. So any student can assert on any given day any of the 6 identities, and no one can question them about it. And if your child is cisgender, which is the gender that they were assigned at birth, feels uncomfortable with a male student transitioning to female, but admitting that he's still sexually attracted to females and then having to undress in front of that male, it is your cisgender student who has to leave to go to the other unisex bathroom, not the transgender student. There's a lot of complications here, and I think a lot more thought, like other school districts are doing, hint, hint, should have been taken into consideration before drafting Wall's policy. And I really do think if other parents were aware of it, I wouldn't be the only one speaking about some of the inconsistencies in the policy. Last, comp time. I went back. The teachers may not be aware, but in the contract for Brian Smythe and Cheryl Dyer, they are allowed to take sick time, annual, vacation time, personal time, and there's a certain amount of limits. What they don't get is something called comp time. They are not allowed unofficial comp time. I've been bringing it up because Brian Smythe, in the last audit, admitted to multiple times using this unofficial comp time. I had to work late, so I took a few hours to go get my daughter at an airport, or I took a few hours to go run an errand. And I get a response. I pointed out how that is extra contractual. It is not in their employment contracts. They should not be paid for that time. It should not be allowed. They should have to take the 2-hour errands off their time. And they wrote back to me a specific question. I asked, how can this possibly be, how can they be getting this money? You know, if you guys don't get it, they don't get it. They shouldn't be getting this free comp time to use as they want, willy-nilly. She approves her own, she approves Brian, and don't they have a real nice time in the Buddy Buddy Club? It's not okay. It's not in your contract. I don't know why the board thinks it's okay, but the hours you work are said to be long. They're supposed to be long, and if it's from 7:30 in the morning to 11 at night, that's your hours. You are a professional, and you are paid a god-awful amount of money to work those hours, way in excess of any of the teachers here. You don't get free time. You have to dock yourself time if you take it during the school day. You are supposed to be available from 9 to 5. If you take off 2 to 4 because you have to attend a meeting at night, improper. It's not okay under the contract. And why the board just sits there and says that's okay. It's not how it works in the rest of the state.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Duran. Your time is up.
Wake up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Christine Langstites. I'm a resident of Wall. I'm back, hopefully at the right time. I certainly appreciate all the Board of Education members who are here as volunteers. I will have to say, though, that I don't think you share my frustration in that as a volunteer on this side of the table, I do not have carte blanche to sit and chit-chat. I try not to come and waste people's time at these meetings, so I don't think that you probably understand my frustration. I want to bring up an issue in terms of the Finance and Facilities Committee in terms of the facility use permits. Back in 2015, when Mrs. Dyer was new as a superintendent, the superintendent and the Board of Education were attempting to enforce a school facility use policy, which initially would have charged PTOs and other local township recreational philanthropic groups and other service organizations rental fees for the use of the actual buildings, as well as custodial and security fees associated with having the buildings open. After much heated debate and public discussion and stakeholder meetings, presentations that we made as parent groups in the July of 2015 BOE meeting, the policy was altered to waive the rental fees of the building for Class 1 groups. At that time, I requested that the Board of Education consider giving the PTO groups 40 hours of custodial time that they could then use and budget, because I agree, no group should be in the school running up tens of thousands of dollars of custodial overtime. I may not be the head of a Fortune 500 company, but I certainly hope that I'm not a wasteful person. My hope at the time is that the Board of Education would have negotiated with us and maybe gave us 20 hours of time, which would have been about $1,000 per PTO. At the time, it was a $64 million budget. I didn't think asking to budget $7,000 toward the, the efforts of the PTOs, who are raising literally tens of thousands of dollars every year and spending them back to support our students, to support our educators, and to pay for facility improvements that in reality should be covered by the Board of Education budget. The fact that they're not, I don't know what to say. And I think the fact that our contributions don't show up on your budget doesn't mean that they don't happen. They're not magically made, and it's very real money that I think that we are ignoring. And I don't think you're looking for too many PTO members that want a big pat on the back, but we would not like to be charged custodial fees within a reasonable amount, which brings me to the point that in 2018, the WIS PTO, in conjunction with the National Junior Honor Society, hosted the debut of the Enchanted Nights Craft and Gift Market. The event required several hundred hours of volunteer time over the course of the entire previous year, generated $9,100 after our expenses were met that are supposed to all go back into the students and this facility that we're all sitting in right now, provided about 100 students between the National Junior Honor Society, our band, our chorus, our orchestra, and numerous unaffiliated students who showed up at this building on Friday night and at 6:30 Saturday morning and unloaded cars and ran lunches and took orders and interacted with 85 merchants as well as 8 local businesses which sponsored the event within Wall Township and this immediate surrounding area. As far as I can see, the event, and we certainly had dozens of parents that were volunteers and staff members. I think it gave the students an opportunity to see how a multifaceted business event was executed, and it was a great event for them to be a part of. All in all, the event was very well received, and it was established on a solid foundation with the hope that it would continue to survive and grow and generate future funds for the WIS school community. Perhaps equally important, it served as a vehicle to bring together members of the Wall community and showcase our facility and our students as outstanding examples of what the Wall District schools offer our community at large. Reviews by our merchants, our Wall Township attendees, probably 800 members of the community attended the event, repeatedly congratulated our students and our volunteers on the outstanding job that they did. Turns out that earlier this month, the F&F committee met specifically, discussed the facility use permit, and they've decided to continue to charge the custodial fees. I offered to be at that meeting in an email that I sent to Mr. Smythe. I was not invited to attend. We had no voice. We have no one at that meeting to represent anyone else in the district. And as a result, it was passed that we would be charged. As a result, in 2019, even though we are holding currently 25 applications, that event is now canceled. And I charge you with raising that money and creating an event. Turns out that—
Mrs. Stites, your time is up.
I'm sorry. I'm going to take 5 more minutes.
No, it doesn't work that—
I'm so sorry. So, and in the end, ladies and gentlemen, this event met our long-term strategic planning by getting students involved—
Mrs. Stites, your time is up and you need to have a seat.
No, I'm not going to sit down at this point. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. So at the end of the day, we helped meet the long-term strategic goals, okay? And in researching this issue, it's also come to my attention that for F&F, we were supposed to have a financial advisory committee that was supposed to be called by December of 2017. That advisory committee is supposed to be taxpayers, it's supposed to be teachers, it's supposed to be administrators, parents, and Board of Ed meetings to advise the F&F of budget concerns. That event has never happened. That committee does not exist. None of us have a voice. This is the only voice we have.
Can you sum up, please?
I beg your pardon?
Can you sum up, please?
Sum up, I think it's a disgrace that there's such an active act of disrespect toward volunteer efforts in this district. And the fact that you delude yourselves that somehow or another that we don't have a public relations crisis, this is a direct slap in the face. I further think that for Mrs. Dyer to suggest to our president of our PTO today discussing this issue that we turn over, that we consider to pay the custodial fees of maybe $800 and turn over the remaining $8,000 and change to the Board of Ed to spend is nothing short of outrageous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else for public comment?
Hi, Andrew Tufts, Wall Township resident for the last year. Yeah, you talk about public relations and disrespecting volunteers. I'm looking at a bunch of volunteers right now, and every time I come in here, you guys are disrespected. I have to thank those of you that continue to disrespect these volunteers because I get to go for an endoscopy tomorrow, and my doctor is going to love checking out the ulcers that I have in my stomach. So thank you for giving me that fodder. As far as the bus depot is concerned, you guys are in Howell because you are not allowed to build on the property that you own. So I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. The Board of Ed owns property. The town people of Wall, some of them decided that you're not allowed to build there for a number of different reasons, financial and environmental and traffic and whatever, but that's a problem. We need to figure that out because I don't know what your other solution is. You guys have looked at tens of things. Mr. Adenizio, you just mentioned it. Mr. McGee's mentioned it before. It's not your turn. I'm taking my time back. Thank you very much. Betsy Cross 2019. She can have Mr. Adenizio's or Mrs. Malloy's seat. Again, you guys are in the position you're in because you were put there by the townspeople. There's nowhere else to put the buses. When I talked to people on the campaign trail down in South Wall, they didn't even know that residents of Wall Township fought against the Board of Education to build a bus depot on land that the Board of Education owned. So that's the information that didn't get out to everyone, but there's, again, people in Wall Township that didn't know that other people in Wall Township are fighting against their own Board of Education. The bus depot, they keep bringing up this 10-year contract. It's a 10-year contract so that we don't have to talk about it every single month. If you guys come up with a solution, we can get out of the contract. You've said that since day one. You've said it again. It's on the website. You talk about misinformation. It's not your turn. You talk about misinformation. There's also a ton of information out there. And on social media the past month, there's been a lot of wonderful ideas that have been brought up that are not new ideas. They're ideas that have been recycled. They're ideas that have been shot down. And they are ideas that are sitting at the bottom of this bus depot pile that now puts us in Howell Township. As far as this LGBTQ issue goes, 5756, I would love to hear how you are going to ask a student to prove that they are transgender, to prove that they are gay, to prove that they are bi, and to prove that their parent who does not approve of the decision that they have come to after years and years of psychological turmoil and trauma, how they are going to prove that their parent does not need to know about this. When children come to our schools, we as parents, we as teachers are there to act as their parents while their parent is not there. Many times when children come into our school, they are in the most comfortable place that they will ever be in their entire day. And if that means that they get to be bisexual, their true identity for the 6 hours or 8 hours a day, and they're not thinking about how their parents hate them, they're not thinking about how disappointing they are, they're not thinking about suicide, then I'm all for it. Sure, we need to educate Wall Township. We are an antiquated community that does not understand a whole lot of the science that our schools teach our children. And LGBTQ rights are one of those things that we need to educate the public on. I am all in favor of being at the forefront of this. I have students in all ranges of the transgender issue who are going through different forms of transitioning. I never want to walk in their shoes. And I never want to walk in their parents' shoes either. But you know what? I've talked to their parents who don't appreciate them and don't respect their decision and still refer to them as their other identity. And I can imagine what that household's like with one person who is confident that they were born the wrong gender, or they were born a particular gender and identified at birth the wrong gender. They have to go through life with the wrong identification. Not only that, they have to exist in a household with the people that birthed them hating the decision that they made and hating the person that they, quote unquote, have chosen to be. Wall Township needs to be at the forefront of this. I commend you for being at the forefront of this. We need to have a forum so that we understand these issues, because the people that are barking down these issues do not understand what it's like. I don't know what it's like to be an LGBTQ member.
Mr. Tufts, your time is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Okay, we will be closing the floor for public comment. Mrs. Dyer, Mr. Smythe, I'd like to provide you an opportunity to respond to anything you'd like to respond to.
I just have a response to the way in which my conversation with Mrs. Tigar was misrepresented by Mrs. Stites. I did have a conversation with Mrs. Tigar today regarding the finance and facilities position on the application of personnel fees. I did make the analogy that the fundraising is not being donated just to the district so that the district could then pay its costs and allocate the rest of the money for student use or facility improvements. So the PTOs, represent 7 organizations. They don't represent all of the parent groups in the district, and the district would not be able to budget for custodial and other charges for the multitude of parent groups that do fundraising in the district. I also made the point that the district very much appreciates the work of the parent groups, and the other side of the perspective is that it's hard to understand why the group would not be inclined to be satisfied, if you will, with a $8,500 donation to the district instead of a $9,100 donation. We need to pay the custodians and security folks. It's about $850. If people want to cancel an event, instead of being able to provide all $9,100 towards the activities of their choice, then that's a decision that people have to be comfortable living with. It's not my decision. Thank you.
Mr. Smythe, is there anything that you wanted to clarify or comment on?
Only a couple things. As custodian of records, I do not prepare board minutes. Custodian of records, I prepare Oprah responses. As board secretary, I prepare the minutes of the Board of Education meeting. With regard to budgeting, salaries in the budget for the 2017-18 school year that were referenced as being inflated or over budgeted, the district was budgeting for 2 years of unsettled contracts. So the second year, we compounded what the anticipated increase would be in the first year. That's why the salaries budgeted in 17-18, which are identifiable within our budgets that we provide, was double the amount that was budgeted in the prior year in the 2016-17 school year. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smythe. At this time, I need a, did you have?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I went out, I don't know the exact date, it was a Sunday in September, prior to us approving any contract. I went out to the site. So it was either Sunday, September 23rd or the 30th. It was one of those 2 Sundays. It was in the afternoon after I got done working. But I did go out there and look at it because I've looked at every site that we've brought up and you know, weighed the pros and cons of everything, and this particular site, as I said before, right now it keeps our employees, and that's important.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adonisio. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Ladies and gentlemen, if anyone here would like to hear the rest of what I would like to say at this point, you're more than happy to do so. I understand members of the Board of Education don't need to stay, but I do think it's important that we recognize that, our group is not willing to continue to fundraise and spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours when the Board of Education does not see the value in supporting that event. And all we've asked for is $1,000 for each group. There are 7 PTOs, that's correct, in this district. I don't think $7,000 out of a $74 million budget is excessive, especially in light of the raises that we have granted in the last couple of years to various members of the administration. So we can certainly get back to that maybe at the next Board of Education meeting, but feel free to reach out